All right, so to continue the discussion of Good Country People, in the last video I was listing the different themes that the short story explores. Okay, it certainly explores identity, human identity, what it means to have an identity, and how to make sense of it, and whether or not it's trustworthy, or whether or not having an identity makes it easier for us to know the person on the inside. Um, other possible other possible themes that you can explore are certainly the theme of knowledge. What does it mean to be knowledgeable? The different kinds of knowledge, and two important themes that I would like that you could certainly focus on is also the themes of hollowness and blindness. All right, and these questions and the questions about hollowness and blindness are listed here, right? And by blindness, I don't mean literal blindness as relates to eyesight, and by hollowness, well, we mean emptiness. All right. So many of these characters, right, do exhibit some form of blindness, if not all of the characters, right? Especially Mrs. Hopewell, Holga, and yeah, those are the two characters that I think represent or illustrate the theme of blindness quite significantly in the story. As for the theme of hollowness, emptiness, Manly Pointer certainly represents, a hollowed person, right? And this is hinted at or symbolized by the fact that he carries around hollowed Bibles, right? Prop Bibles, fake Bibles that when you open them, there's, an actually storage space and not an actual Bible. And we realize this in the scene in the barn where he opens his suitcase and he takes out his prop, his fake Bible. He opens it, and inside it is a bottle of whiskey. So the Bible is hollowed, and the term hollow, if you go back and reread the short story, you'll see that the term hollow is repeated a few times, right? So anything, I think in literature, in serious literature, any concept or word or ideas or imagery or images that are repeated, in different places a few times should tell you that those repetitions are significant, that those words, those ideas, those images are significant. And as a critic, and as a literary critic, or as someone who analyzes literature, you should take note of those repetitions and investigate about their possible meanings. All right. So, but Manly Pointer is not the only hollowed character in the story. Mrs. Hopewell, is perhaps also hollow, and so is Holga. Holga is also hollow as well, in addition to being blind, right? So let's kind of slow down and discuss how these characters represent those themes. Okay, so how is Mrs. Hopewell blind? How is Holga blind? Mrs. Hopewell blind is blind, right? She is a very nice character, right? She is one of those people who like to maintain peace. She seems to have an aversion to tension, to problems, to issues. So she's one of those people who will always try to smooth things over, to calm things over if there's a sense that an argument is going to emerge or erupt. She is the one who will say nice things, to kind of calm everybody down and reestablish a sense of order and peace in the social setting, right? And one of the ways that she does this is by invoking platitudes or cliched expressions such as, okay, the word is, it takes all kinds of people to make the word. Takes all kinds of people to make the word. Good country people are the salt of the earth. Well, that's life, right? These are all platitudes or cliched expressions that she says, you know, as a mean to calm things down, as a mean not to engage in any kind of possible conflict, right? And one of the scenes that illustrate this pretty effectively is the scene in which Manly Pointer kind of invites himself into her house the first time he presents himself as a Bible salesman, right? He kind of deliberately, if you go back and reread that scene, you'll see that he deliberately fumbles into the hallway past the front door, right? He pretends to sneeze and he pretends to kind of fall over because his suitcase is too large for him, and he's dressed kind of awkwardly too, right? So he kind of affects all of these things in order to insinuate himself into her home because, you know, she doesn't invite him in. He wants, and he has his motive for wanting to be inside. All right. And then he talks with her about having a Bible in the living room, right? And she doesn't, and she says she doesn't have one in the living room, and he starts to sort of criticize her for that, or at least, you know, he said that every good Christian should have, you know, a Bible displayed in the living room, right? So the tone is critical, and Mrs. Hopewell receives it as critical, and so she starts to get offensive, and then it looks like, you know, they're about to get into some kind of a conflict, you know, of an argument. You know, he says, she said, of different viewpoints. But before it gets to that boiling point, Mrs. Hopewell kind of backs off, and she utters a series of these cliched expressions or platitudes, you know, about, you know, it takes all kinds of people to make the world, that's life, good country people are the salt of the earth, right? And expressions like that, and those expressions do have the effect of calming things down, right? So that, excuse me, so that Manly Pointer and her go back to being civil again because they are practically strangers, right? And so that's how she uses cliche expressions, and that says a lot about Mrs. Hopewell blindness, right? Because that scene that scene, as well as other details, right, if she observes them and take notes of them, should reveal to her that Manly Pointer, that something is off with her, with Manly Pointer, and that she shouldn't be too friendly with him, but she ignores, or she chooses not to register those kinds of details, or not to take note not to take note any kind of uncomfortable feelings about anything or anybody, because like I said, she just wants to live her quiet life, right? And another example from the short story that also demonstrates Mrs. Hopewell's blindness is Mrs. Hopewell blindness and willingness to be blind, in order to maintain, you know, a semblance of peace, is her defense of hiring Mrs. Freeman, right? Because Mrs. Freeman, when she applied for the job to work on Mrs. Hopewell's farm, she did not, her past employer did not give her a good reference, right? He called her nosy and unpleasant and all of those things, right? So if your past employer gave your prospective employer that kind of review or reference, right, you would do well to not consider that person, right? But Mrs. Hopewell come up with an excuse for them to hire Mrs. Freeman, saying that, you know, she's good country people, and good country people are hard to find. So So that's another example of how she willingly choose to be blind and how her use of cliche expressions is a means for her to delude herself, right? And Holga is also blind, right? She doesn't, as much of a educated person as she is blind to common sense, right? She doesn't have the common experience of a young woman, right? But in her blindness or in her self-delusion that she's better than everyone else, she hurts herself. So her blindness hurts herself. She doesn't realize that she's not living, well, a part of her does know that she's not living her full potential, but she doesn't realize that she still has a lot to learn about life, and that being open to other people and attempting to connect with her immediate surrounding and the people um, that come into her life, or the people that she sees on a regular basis, such as Mrs. Freeman and her mother. She doesn't realize that attempting to make connection with real life, everyday people that she sees, right, can also add to her knowledge and can also make her life richer, right? So she is blind in that sense. She's blind of her own flaws and defects as far as reality is concerned, right? She uses her education and her degrees as a kind of prop to lean upon, right? And to carry her through life as a kind of excuse for her to stop learning, for her to disconnect from any kind of human relationship, or for her to withdraw from any kind of human relationship. Well, she doesn't withdraw. If anything, she spurns any kind of attempt, any person's attempt to connect with her, right? And Manly's pointer, right? The theme about identity is also quite relevant, or is helpful to understand Manly Pointers. We realize that he's not a Bible salesman at the end, and that his name is not Manly Pointer. He says that he goes from town to town assuming different identities in order to trick impressionable young ladies with, strange physical characteristics such as Holga, right? And so his characterization raises the question of what it means to have a specific identity, or does it matter at all, or is it just a construct, or does it help us to know who we really deal with? Okay, if you can so easily slide in and out of a certain identity and assume others when you go to, a different place where no one knows you, well, what does it say about the reliability of human identity at all? And all of those things. So both of these stories, The Story of an Hour and Good Country People, are very complex, right? And you can certainly explore any aspect of the stories that I've just discussed and more that are posed here in these questions. Make sure you read them, right? And pick one and analyze the text. Make sure that you use examples from the short stories, as I have done in my lectures, to illustrate your point, to demonstrate your point. And if you have any additional questions about the story, something about it that you don't understand, or if you want me to explain any other aspect that I didn't go over, and I know that my lectures were very, very brief in the time that's given to me, but I would like for you to look at these other questions, to consider all, other possibilities of focus for these short stories and explore them.